the people who paid the comedians to come to this are not good people. They are. It's a pretty brutal regime. They've things, and so people are questioning why you would go over there and take their money.
No, Kimmel is going crazy on this man right now.
Because you were there, you made this decision. I'm curious as to why you decided to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. Because, it's something I put a lot of thought into, and I have an aunt that lived there for a while, and I talked to her about this, and she said, there's people over there that don't agree with the stuff that the government's doing. And to ascribe like the worst behavior of the government onto those people, it's not fair. Just like there's people in America that don't agree with the things the government is doing.
I mean, the government over there is arresting people for peaceful protest. I mean, I know, we're doing things over here.
I think that's a weak argument for that purpose.
These are not good people over there. So did you deal with those people specifically?
No, I was just there to do a show for the people. And I talked to my wife about this, before I went. And she said, whenever there's repressive societies like this, they try to keep things out, whether it's rock and roll music or, blue jeans, because it makes people curious about outside ideas, outside values. And this is a very young country. Like half the country's under the age of 25, and things can really change. And to me, like a comedy festival felt like something that's pushing things to be more open and to push a dialogue.
CIA World Book Facts.
And especially being me and looking the way I do and being from a Muslim background, it felt like something I should be a part of. And I hope it pushes things in a positive direction.
Did you have these concerns when you performed in India many years ago?
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff there that, I don't feel great about, and I did it, and, I'm Indian, and it was an important experience for me, and, comedy in India is really thriving, and people are talking about things that are happening there, and some of them are even, go to jail and things, but for this Riyadh thing, it was something I really thought about, and even before I went, I said, I'm going to do this, and I hope it's positive, and, if I'm going to do this, I share the concerns that people have brought up, and it's all valid, and I said to myself and my team, I said, hey, if we do this, part of the fee should go to support causes that support, free press and human rights, and,
did they instruct the audience
specifically?
They were like, please,
and Human Rights Watch as well. And it's a complicated issue, but I felt like it was something that's pushing things in the right direction. I hope.
So you felt that that in the long term this will be a positive. People seeing comedy and American comedy and free.
Yeah, I mean, so many people were there talking about stuff, and I hope people see that and they go, wow, this was really great, and I want more of this, not just in comedy, but in everything, to push things to be more open and to have the ability to say what we want and to have dissent and all this stuff, and hopefully it's a step in that direction.
Aziz Ansari, everybody.
Okay. Yeah, because I know y'all hold on. Because I know y'all talked about it last week. I think because Trevor Noah said something similarly. Like his take on this was really interesting, where he was like, yeah, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't necessarily feel safe over there. Trevor also said that there is an amount of money that they could give him and he would have gone. He basically said, like, you would have to pay me a certain dollar figure for every person that I would disappoint. And I just have to go like, okay, I'm going. And then somebody go, I can't believe you did it. Trevor and I go, okay, 10,000. You have to pay me that amount for every single person, however many millions of people would be disappointed with me. But I think he was being serious. But
people said that. I mean, several of them have basically said that. So yeah,
it's like, hey, they just paid me a lot. And I think that he did condemn it. But Trevor is very talented at condemning something without burning a bridge, like condemning a behavior without starting beef with the person that he's condemning.
I love him as a thinker, like just being blatantly honest about my bias in this conversation. But yes, go ahead.
That said, I think that I think I still fall on the direction of that these comics should not have gone. But the argument that my understanding is, so the Riyadh Comedy Festival, it's part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plan to revitalize and sort of uplift the culture. So it's this large scale state funded cultural revitalization program. And this festival is part of that trajectory. And my understanding is that the way that their economy is set up, there's not like independent comedy festivals that are happening there. Any big festival is from the government. So there's a singular creative party. So you don't have, like in the U.S. economy, you might have state sponsored. So it's like, a show at the White House. You'd have
the Kennedy Center, is effectively government sponsored, that kind of shit. Yes.
Then you might have state funded, which is that, the United States gives to PBS and then PBS creates, Cosmos or whatever, but they're not directly sponsoring and creating that. And then you just have private sector. So you go to see a movie and it's like, cool, that was a Marvel movie. The government didn't have anything to do with it. My understanding is those latter two categories don't exist in Saudi Arabia. So that gives a little bit of context. And the argument that if you're going to, if the festival is, if the country is going to exist anyway, regardless of whether or not you go or don't go, I guess the question is, does going have more of a negative impact in terms of causing people to forgive the negative crimes of that regime, which I think you might argue when we're talking about like Snoop Dogg going to perform for the Trump's inauguration. It's like you're making Trump more acceptable to a certain population.
Yes.
You're alienating a certain part of your audience, but you're also making Trump more palatable to some people who would have been like, nah. So are we doing that for Saudi Arabia? On the other side, it's like, well, if you introduce people in Saudi Arabia to this, which is not just the government, but it's not even mostly the government, it's the people of it, and you introduce whatever we want to say, Western ideas or just outside world, does that create a curiosity and a lens on Saudi Arabia that makes them at least less likely to do the same level of public crimes? I think that both of those forces are there. Tell me if you disagree. And then the question is whether or not one is stronger than the other.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but I do think that is the conversation. So when we talked about it, it wasn't last week. It was 2 weeks ago, I think, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point. But the distinction I drew is because I think a lot of people initially viewed this as a lot of these comedians are performing in a bad country. A bad country. So if you want to put value judgments on whether or not something is a bad country, then I think that makes the argument, needlessly broad in terms of the question of like, well, should they perform in the United States based on what their beliefs and moral things are? This was the fact that this was state sponsored by a government that has done those specific things, I think is why this is even a conversation.
That's where the conversation starts. Yeah.
That's where the conversation starts. And I think that if they're saying we are introducing people to more pro-social, more quote unquote Western ideals via this mechanism, I call bullshit. Okay. Because you're working with an arm of the government in this. There's no way that you are stepping outside of a lane that they've prescribed to you to continue the grip that they have on that society in the fashion that they want it and not having repercussions on the spot, right? So anything that they said, I think, was very much a curated experience. I think it was very much something that
North Korea vibes.
Yeah, I think it was very much something they discussed with the people that were putting on the actual event in and of itself. And I think that saying like, oh, we're just introducing them to people, like, unless you're saying that your presence and like you being on stage is an introduction to Western, quote unquote, Western ideologies is enough to move the needle, which I would personally disagree with. I think that that's a completely bullshit argument. I think that the best argument that I've heard about the whole situation is that they paid me enough to disregard all of that.
I think that
that's the most real argument. That's the most real and I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I think it's morally upstanding. I'm not saying I think it's good. But when somebody tells me that they paid me enough not to care about that, I'm like, cool. I know what that means. I know where that stands. I've done things in my life that I didn't necessarily agree with because of a check. Not at that scale, but been there, done that. So I understand that. But people trying to mix it up where they're doing, the
humanitarian aid.
I'm moving the needle in this kind of shit in a sanctioned event,
state sponsored,
in a country where the government locks down every single aspect of what their people do. I just don't get that.
Yo, people, it's almost Halloween, which means it's almost Thanksgiving, which means it's almost motherfucking Christmas. Get your stocking stuffers here. We've got our flagship It's a Red Flag card game where every single card gives you a prompt that asks, is this a red flag in dating? So at the kickback, at the cookout, on a date night, you and your conversational partner can walk through these and decide whether or not you all are the ones waving the red flag. We've also got our card game In All Seriousness, where every single card has 2 prompts on it. That means it has double the prompts of that other card game. Each one of them has a serious prompt and a silly prompt so that you can decide the vibe of the conversation. It's great for laughs or getting closer to another person during a cute little hot girl dinner party. You can grab that at shop.wavingtheredflag.com. And anybody who's a member of our Patreon or YouTube community gets 10% off. Cop that for yourself or those that you love. Peace. Okay, so I agree that it's just like everybody has. I don't even know if it's true to say everybody has a number, but I think that most people on most people on some things have a number. That's because I think there's things that there's no amount of money you could pay me that I would do. If you were just like, we'll give you $1 trillion, billion, it's like no matter how you can give me infinite money, there's things that I would never do. But everybody that listens to this podcast has at some point in their life worked for a corporation that was doing some fuck shit. But I think that the difference is, for me, where that becomes a less compelling argument is we have to eat. Whereas if you're Bill Burr, you don't have to eat. You're paying for a second house. And I think that's where, so like comedians who went to Riyadh and they're making $500K or less a year, I'm a little bit more like, okay, I get it. You're buying financial security across your life. Bill Burr, that motherfucker's been secure since forever. You know what I'm saying? Multi-generational. He don't need nothing else. He's just paying for more airplane pilot lessons. It doesn't make a difference. Yeah. But I think that the money argument and the moral argument are actually two different things. Why somebody did it and whether or not it's okay that they did it are two different things. Every worker shows up to work for money. That's why everybody ever did anything that was work. So of course the reason that they went to the show is because they were paid to do so. The question is whether or not the impact was negative. And that just goes back to the previous points. And so I think the money part is actually, I think, irrelevant until we establish, is it bad? And your point is bad. And so they just paid me to do something bad. And that's fair,
my point. Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, again, I still mostly agree. Like, I think it's mostly just bad. To give pushback, though, I would say, you mentioned, do you think that the presence of certain comedians is by itself pushes the needle, opens things up? I think, yeah, because I'm thinking like they had the comedian who and I need some specifics to make some of this point, which I don't know, but maybe you do. They said that there were only two rules. They couldn't make fun of the government and they couldn't make fun of the religion. Those to me are extremely broad categories. And I'm wondering how they were actually implemented. Because if you want to, every kind of conversation, every speech can fall into those two categories.
Yes,
because
exactly.
Religion cover worldview about everything under existence. Those cover, that's everything. So I wonder how that was actually enforced. But one of the comedians, she was like a lesbian, a queer woman. I don't know what Saudi Arabia's vibe is on that, but I'm assuming it's not the most progressive. If that is the case, I would say that the existence of that comic, if she did any jokes that acknowledge that by itself, I think that's doing something. Now, you might argue that, well, yeah, but they allowed that. I don't think that undermines it. If they go, yeah, we're allowing that as part of our negotiation for bringing these comedians in and kind of creating this new thing and on our roadmap to what Saudi Arabia looks like in 2030, I would say that just is a country changing and becoming pro-social in whatever way we define that. That's just what that is.
Yeah, I think that makes it slightly more nuanced, but I'm also of the mindset that, like, you know, there were points in the country where, like, you know, the Temptations could perform at the Copacabana, and then, you know, and it still wasn't like particularly equal. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily.
But do you think it was more or less? Because we can't do 0 and 100. We have to do more or less. You know?
Yeah, like I think in certain situations, I'm actually okay with certain things being zero sum.
Okay.
I think.
How does that apply here?
Yeah, I think that there have been various things in you know, like Saudi Arabia that they made exceptions for over the years. Like a big thing that people talked about was WWE, like, performing over there and like scantily clad women. Like, it's effectively like a woman wrestling in a G-string over there at the same time as this. So like there have been various things over the course of, like, I'd say probably the last 3 decades that have happened like that, and they haven't moved the needle. So I think that a lot of that is specifically for show. They carve out these very niche situations where they're like, we'll allow it this time to give the perception that we're moving in the right direction, so that people can't challenge us in the same way they would if we didn't allow those.
We're still doing everything the same.
We're still doing everything the same. However, I do think that even that view could probably be nuanced a little bit out if I knew a little bit more about Saudi Arabia, which I don't. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on the day-to-day life of the average, Saudi citizen. But taking like a 30,000 foot view, I'm just like, that shit's already been happening. Like they've always been doing, like not always, but like in the recent past, they've done very similar things, and it hasn't moved the needle in terms of what that looks like.
Like, and we're guessing at facts here, but if I'm thinking about what America is, so if we're talking about America 1962, pick your year, whatever, we've got a fascistic, authoritarian, apartheid state at that point in the country. A lot of people would argue that it's not gotten much better since then. I would say that's sort of ridiculous. Notwithstanding the last,
I'd say it's nuanced. Yeah. I'd say it's objectively better, but I get what the nuance is. How like
there's nuance of that. It's not
why people
fixed.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not fixed, sure, but like to say it's not like get in the fucking time machine, dog. You don't want to do it. No, nobody's taking that fucking deal. It's not much of a muchness. So that said, to some extent, I feel like Black entertainment and Black entertainers to some extent humanize Black folks in a way that moved the needle. Not enough. It still required
other things
to happen, civil rights movement to happen. But I think going like, man, I thought Black folks were only shiftless, and then you go, okay, but Nat King Cole, man, he's great. You know what I mean? Or B.B. King, or who? No, that's farther up in the future. But whoever, like that those artists, I think that made a difference for people, 100%. Yeah. And then putting that onto Saudi Arabia, we're both guessing. My guess is in the direction that I think that those things have a impact, not enough, but an impact. Okay, let's see.
We know that a lot of you love that true long form content. You can make a playlist yourself, but there's nothing like having it all in one place for you. You don't just want to watch those 15, 20-minute clips that we have. You want to watch all of it for the full hour 30. So if that is something that interests you, please join the community by becoming a part of our inner circle here on the podcast via our Patreon or YouTube memberships. On both of these, you get full access to the uninterrupted episodes. You can also rewatch our live streams anytime you want and get discounts on the merch, including 10% off of our new card game, In All Seriousness, featured heavily and prominently on the episode and the live. Always be plugging. You also get access to our Discord. As the illustrious Josh always says, we got some very same people over there. So make sure that you take advantage of being a part of a smaller, more close-knit community that is curated from people that fuck with us in the community that we've tried to build and are very much like-minded and enjoy the content as much as you do. Come through in peace.
It's a red flag.